सर उनके लिए तो अभी जारी इन्वेस्टिगेशन चल रही है। आज जैसे अभी आपके ही चैनल पे हमने देखा कि सीसीटीवी फुटेज जो है वो रिकवर किया जा रहा है।
नहीं, वो तो आरजेडी के नेता नहीं है ना, वो तो आप ही के नेता है, आपके
वो
सहयोगी दल के नेता है।
हाँ, जी जी, तो देखिए जैसे मेरे नेता आदरणीय अमित शाह जी ने स्पष्ट करा है कि वो अलायंस पार्टनर के नेता हैं, उनके ग्राउंड्स होंगे उनको टिकट देने के। और रही बात अभी जिस पे हम लोग जिस मुद्दे पे बात कर रहे हैं सर, इनके जो जेनजी सपोर्टर्स हैं, अगर आप उनको भी देखेंगे तो क्या गाने, कई अश्लील गाने बन रहे हैं, बंदूक कट्टा लहराते हुए बिहार की बहू बेटियों को डराया जा रहा है बगैर कि आएगी सरकार, तो मेरे भैया की सरकार, मतलब तेजस्वी भैया की सरकार जब आएगी तो हम बिहार में ये करेंगे। वो मैं उन शब्दों को दोहराना भी नहीं चाहता।
लेकिन मयंक जी, उसी जेन जी को तेजस्वी भी बोल रहे हैं कि मैं उनको नौकरियां दूंगा, मतलब 10 लाख नौकरियां दूंगा। जन स्वराज नाम का पार्टी भी उसी जेन जी को टारगेट कर रही है ना।
सर एक बात बताइए ना, तेजस्वी यादव जी के आंकड़े अब तो बकायदा फैक्चुअली उनको हम लोगों ने उनका पोस्टमार्टम कर लिया है सारे चैनल से लगभग। एक बात वो आउट ऑफ द बॉक्स ही थिंकिंग बोल रहे हैं। दैट इज नॉट आउट ऑफ द प्लेनेट है वो कर ही नहीं सकते सर। 2,87,00,000 परिवार जो हैं उनमें बताइए बिहार की जो साक्षरता दर है वो 71% है। और प्रत्येक घर से वो कह रहे हैं कि मैं पकड़ पकड़ के नौकरियां दूंगा। बेसिकली नौकरियां नहीं है, वो अपने लैंड फॉर जॉब स्कैम का ब्रोशर जारी कर रहे हैं सर। वो सीजन 2 इज कमिंग के आओ अपनी जमीनें दो और नौकरियां उसके बदले मैं तुमको दूंगा, उसके बदले जमीनें तो ले ली जाएंगी।
Let's see, it's for the people of Bihar to
जमीन तो
decide.
1 रुपए में आप बेच रहे हैं बड़े-बड़े कारोबारियों को।
It's for the people of Bihar to decide. It's going to be a fascinating election. First phase is in a couple of days from now on Thursday. Second phase is next Tuesday, and like they say, may the best man or the best political party in this case win. Let's move on now to the other big story that we are tracking, and that is the start of what is called the biggest tri-combat exercise, some would say arguably in the history of the Indian Defence Forces. It's called Exercise Trishul, which is focused primarily on the western sector as well as on amphibious operations. It marks the biggest tri-services drill after Operation Sindoor earlier this year. The aim of the exercise is to validate one, joint operational procedures, joint theatre commands, enhance interoperability between the three services, and to strengthen network integration amongst all three services. It will also feature extensive maritime operations, including amphibious landings like the INS Jalshawa and the landing craft utility vessels, alongside carrier operations, as well as air and sea coordinated missions between the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force. Now, the exercise involves a significant deployment across all the three services, showcasing their combined operational strength. So here's what each of the three services will be deploying for the Operation Trishul. The Indian Army, 20,000 Indian Army troops will be participating, supported by heavy armor like the T-90 tanks, the Arjun tanks, along with the light machine guns, the howitzers, the light artillery for further fire support. The Air Force will be deploying its frontline fighter jets, including the 4.5 generation Rafale and the Sukhoi 30 MKIs, along with support aircraft like the IL-78 transport aircraft, the refuelers, and also various unmanned aerial vehicles, the UAVs that we saw. A bulk of it we saw during the 4 days of Operation Sindoor, and many are saying that this is the future of warfare, drone warfare. We are seeing this whether in Israel, Gaza, whether it is in Russia, Ukraine, whether it's for surveillance and reconnaissance purposes, or even for frontline attacks. So you will see a lot of UAVs being deployed through Operation Trishul. And then you have the Navy, which has committed major surface combatants, notably the aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, as well as the amphibious transport dock, the INS Jalshawa, demonstrating significant power projection and amphibious warfare capabilities. So what exactly is the significance of Operation Trishul, the exercise itself? What is the message that the Indian services are trying to send out to their enemies? Conducted near Pakistan's western border, the Sir Creek, which, apart from Kashmir, of course, is the other big sort of signal that India is sending out, India's readiness to operate in contested border zones. Pakistan's issuance of airspace restrictions, or NOTAM, effectively a no-fly zone, ahead of the Trishul operation underscores the perception and how it's perceived by the adversaries. Coming after operations like Operation Sindoor, this drill connects with India's active operational posture rather than just a training exercise. The emphasis on theatre commands, joint logistical planning and operations, as well as multi-domain warfare underlines India's transition to future-ready force structures. By using indigenous platforms and emphasizing Atmanirbharta, The exercise aligns with the broader national defense strategy, and that's all the more important coming as it does in the aftermath of Operation Sindoor, the largest exercise that was undertaken by all three services over a period of 4 days back in the summer, back in May.
The idea is to develop systems so that we can do joint planning right from the stage when we are drawing up the conceptual requirements for what we should be doing in a particular exercise, what is it that we want to derive out of the exercise, and then of course put together the assets that are required to participate in the exercise, and then actually execute the exercise on ground. Certainly cyber and information warfare are very important aspects, and therefore we have designed a special cyber exercise as a tri-service element during this phase to run concurrent to the conventional exercises on ground. So that of course will run parallel. Information warfare is again being looked at, and especially how to counter disinformation campaigns. And space assets are going to be central to this exercise. So we will bring together our space assets in terms of surveillance to further refine and to improve the information landscape, as we call it from the marine space, the maritime domain awareness.
And add to all of this twist about the biggest tri-services exercise is US President Donald Trump, who's made a stunning claim that Pakistan, among other countries like Russia and China, has been testing covertly a nuclear device. Now, if this is true, and we have to add the caveat that not everything that Trump says is true, but if it is true, it is a stunning claim and one which has profound implications for India and India's nuclear posture. As two nuclear-armed neighbors, India and Pakistan have had a self-imposed moratorium on nuclear testing for the last almost 30 years. In fact, certainly since the 1998 test. First India tested in Pokhran, and a few days later, Pakistan tested in the Chagai Hills. Since those tests, which were publicly declared and publicly claimed tests, there have been no nuclear devices publicly tested by either India or Pakistan. But now, that could change if Trump's claims are true. First, let me play out what Trump said in an interview to CBS 60 Minutes, and then subsequently I'll break down why what he said is such a big deal.
Russia's testing and China's testing, but they don't talk about it. You know, we're a open society. We're different. We talk about it. We have to talk about it because otherwise you people are going to report. They don't have reporters that are going to be writing about it. We do. No, we're going to test because they test and others test. And certainly North Korea's been testing. Pakistan's been testing. They test way underground where people don't know exactly what's happening with the test. You feel a little bit of a vibration.
In a recent interview to CBS News' 60 Minutes, US President Donald Trump claimed that Pakistan, along with other countries like China and Russia, had been secretly conducting nuclear weapons tests. For India, which already faces a nuclear-armed neighbor in Pakistan, this raises big questions. Should India be concerned about this? Does India need to respond to this as well, perhaps with its own test? And just how balanced is the nuclear equation between the two South Asian rivals? India and Pakistan have fought multiple wars in the last 75 years, and the rivalry is long-standing, although India has won all 4 of the last 4 major wars. Both countries became nuclear-armed states. India tested first in 1974 and then again in 1998 with the Pokhran tests. Pakistan followed shortly after. Today, the nuclear arsenals of India and Pakistan are among the few non-Western powers with substantial number of warheads. According to the International Arms Control Association, India is estimated to possess up to 172 warheads and Pakistan approximately 170 warheads. On the testing front, for decades now, major nuclear powers have pledged to a self-imposed moratorium on explosive tests. This most countries have stuck to for the last 30+ years, but underground tests or covert tests are still technically possible, and that is exactly what Trump is referring to. In the CBS News interview, Trump also said that Russia was testing and China is testing, but they don't talk about it. So the key distinction here is that Pakistan may have been testing, India has its own nuclear arsenal, and the regional balance is fragile. Trump's public claim that Pakistan is testing its nuclear weapons should raise alarm bells in India. What does testing actually mean here? Trump suggests it could be underground detonations or simply non-announced trials of nuclear-capable systems, even though public monitoring is supposed to detect seismic activity. Pakistan too has officially not confirmed any such nuclear test publicly. So we're basically dealing with a situation, a claim by a US president, rather than a public assertion of that claim or a repudiation of that claim by the country concerned, which in this case is Pakistan. Which means we have to exercise a degree of caution. However, it is also a recorded fact that in the days and weeks in and around Operation Sindoor, which is when there was a limited war between India and Pakistan over the summer back in May, there were multiple reports of heightened seismic activity that emerged from different parts of Pakistan. It is possible that these were covert nuclear tests, and this is what Trump is referring to. For Pakistan, the nuclear program has been primarily India-facing. Its doctrine, its missile launches, its force posture, they're all largely centered around the India threat. India's nuclear doctrine, on the other hand, has traditionally emphasized NFU, or no first use, though recent strategic shifts may bring this NFU policy under review. So what if Pakistan is indeed covertly testing its nuclear devices? It could signal an expansion of its nuclear arsenal, or simply a qualitative improvement of its warheads, meaning it could be new delivery systems, tactical weapons. For India, this raises the pressure to either match or to counter Pakistan's tests. Now, what's important is that the number of warheads alone do not give you the entire story. Delivery systems, whether they fit on missiles, whether they're launched from the air, from fighter jets, or from submarines, the nuclear doctrine, the command and control structure, all of these matter a lot more than just the number of warheads. India has a bigger conventional military, no doubt about it, and that's why India's been able to defeat Pakistan in the last 4 major wars. Pakistan tries to compensate for that via its nuclear posture. So in short, a claim of a covert nuclear test by Pakistan, if it is true, challenges the status quo. And if it does challenge the status quo, it could trigger a reaction loop here in India. It raises the risk of regional arms race. So the question is, why now? Why does this matter for India? India is sandwiched between 2 major nuclear neighbors, Pakistan to its west and China to its north. If Pakistan is enhancing its nuclear capability, it could upset India's strategic calculus. A covert or unannounced nuclear test by Pakistan may reduce the qualitative gap, which would pressurize India to respond, potentially increasing its military spending. It could also alter its basic strategic posture, all of which, of course, would have diplomatic implications. So power under global non-proliferation frameworks. A destabilizing move from Pakistan would complicate that narrative. It also means India would have to upgrade its deterrence. India may have to accelerate its missile and submarine programs, its nuclear triad, which is the ability to deliver these nuclear weapons from land, air, or sea, to ensure that it has survivable second strike capability. Also, diplomatically, India could raise this issue internationally at the United Nations, at the IAEA, or even through bilateral talks with the United States. It could highlight this claim of a secret nuclear test by Pakistan, which Trump has made, and ask for accountability. India may also need to allocate more resources to its strategic forces, its missile defense, and its early warning systems. And that could have budgetary implications. It could affect domestic priorities. But right now, the big question is, should India test as well? That moratorium would be a major policy shift. Testing would carry serious international costs, whether it is sanctions, whether it is reputational damage. It could also lead to the possibility of an escalation of an arms race. India must weigh whether the strategic gains outweigh the risks. So the answer is, while India can strongly respond via deterrence upgrades, diplomacy, and conventional force, a full nuclear test would be a last resort, and likely even undesirable unless India's deterrence credibility is perceived to be severely undermined by Pakistan's tests. But all of it depends on whether or not Trump's claim is true. When Donald Trump met Xi Jinping in Korea last week, he described the meeting as a meeting of the G2, or the Group of Two. This is something that a lot of American presidents, certainly in the last two and a half decades, this is a situation, a G2 situation, that a lot of American presidents have tried to avoid. But now Trump is underlining the new reality, that China is an equal of America, not a competitor, but a peer. And this has profound down-the-line implications for India, for the Quad, and for other countries in Southeast Asia. I explain. US President Donald Trump just called his meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping as a G2 moment. Two letters, one short phrase. But that phrase, G2, may have just redrawn the balance of power in Asia. Because if America and China are now the Group of Two, what happens to the rest of the world, particularly countries like India, Japan, and Australia? At the summit in Busan, Trump emerged, beaming, all smiles, calling it a great meeting of both our countries. He announced a sweeping truce with China. Tariffs on Chinese goods would be cut by 10% down to 47%. Beijing would resume buying American soybean and sorghum. And perhaps most significantly, both sides agreed to reopen direct military-to-military communication channels, the kind of military channels that had gone cold since the Cold War. On paper, it looked like a victory for stability. But underneath all those smiles and the bonhomie was a much colder and much more dangerous reality. For the very first time in decades, a sitting US president has publicly acknowledged China as an equal, not a competitor, but a peer.
I thought it was a great meeting. I think it was a very friendly meeting. It was a good meeting for two very large, powerful countries. And that's the way we should get along with the large, powerful.
Why did you write your...
The idea of a G2 is not a new one. It first surfaced in the late 2000s, which was basically the notion that the world's future could be managed by two giant countries. Washington and Beijing will decide what the global rules of engagement are. But here's the thing. Every American president, from Bill Clinton to Barack Obama and even Trump 1.0, avoided a G2. Because the G2 world means one thing, that everyone else becomes secondary. Bill Clinton pushed for engagement, but he underlined further alliances in Asia. George W. Bush deepened ties with both Japan and India, even as he fought wars in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Barack Obama launched the pivot to Asia, which was explicitly to prevent China from dominating the region. Even Trump, in his first term, despite all the chaos around it, was defined by tariffs and confrontation with China, not cooperation. And yet here we are in Trump 2.0, seeing the American president speak of China not as a rival, but as a partner in shaping global peace. This is not just a diplomatic thaw. This is a strategic shift, one that signals to the rest of the world that America no longer sees itself as the leader of the Indo-Pacific, but as one half of a new global duopoly.
He's a great leader of a very powerful, very strong country, China. And what can I say? We have, it was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made. A lot of decisions were made, too. There wasn't too much left out there.
So why now? Why has Trump, in his second term, embraced the idea of a G2 so enthusiastically? Part of it is economic fatigue. The trade war with China has battered American farmers, American industry, and supply chains. Trump wants a win. He wants cheaper imports, he wants calmer markets, and he wants a revival of American exports to China. Part of it is also geopolitical calculation. He wants to end America's endless commitments around the world and instead cut a grand bargain with the one country that is powerful enough to challenge America. For Xi Jinping, the benefits are obvious. For years, Beijing has wanted Washington to treat it as an equal and not as a challenger. And now Trump has delivered exactly that. He's given Xi Jinping a photo op, he's given him the language he wanted, and most importantly, he has given China and its leader the legitimacy that they've sought. But what does this G2 really mean for the rest of Asia? Let's start with India. For the last 2 decades, India's grand strategy has been to partner with America and other democracies to balance China's rise. The US-India relationship, the Indo-Pacific strategy, the Quad, all of these were built on one simple assumption: that America would stay committed to containing Chinese dominance in Asia. But if Washington is now accepting Beijing as an equal, as a peer, and not as a competitor, then that entire foundation begins to crack. India's leverage weakens, its role as a regional balancer shrinks, and its hard-fought position at the global high table looks a little less secure. Then come Japan and Australia, again 2 countries that are part of the Quad. Both countries have tied their security future to the American presence in the Indo-Pacific. They have relied on the idea that America would be the ultimate security guarantor. It would back them militarily, politically, economically, and it will keep Chinese ambitions in check. But a US-China duopoly changes that entire worldview. If the world's 2 biggest powers now plan to manage the system together, then smaller allies become bystanders. They no longer help shape the rules. Washington and Beijing make the rules, and the rest of Asia just has to obey them. And then, of course, there is Taiwan. In Trump's grand statement about everlasting peace between China and America, there was no mention of Taiwan at all. No reaffirmation of America's defense commitments, no reference to strategic ambiguity. If the United States now sees China as a strategic equal, a partner that it wants to cooperate with rather than compete against, then would Washington still risk a confrontation with China to defend Taiwan? Trump was asked that question. So what happens next? We're already seeing the outlines of a new global order. Washington and Beijing have announced joint working groups on trade, on rare earths, on tech supply chains. They've agreed to open defense hotlines and even consider joint anti-piracy drills. Meanwhile, regional frameworks like the Indo-Pacific, like the Quad, which once symbolized unity against China's hegemony, are now starting to look sidelined. Japan and Australia are deepening their ties with India on their own, despite America. ASEAN countries are hedging their bets. Everyone is watching and wondering whether America, which has long promised a free and open Indo-Pacific, has just quietly traded that away to China. Because a true G2, or group of 2 between America and China, does not mean world peace. It means power concentrated in 2 capitals, in Washington and in Beijing, while everyone else lives with the consequences of that. So what is this framing of G2, America and China? What are the down-the-line implications for India, for the Quad? I want to go across now to Ambassador Ashok Kant. He's former Indian ambassador to China. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for speaking with us. It's an interesting framing. It's been, doing the rounds for a number of years. I'm sure, people were talking about this even when you were in service. But for a sitting American president, ahead of a meeting with the Chinese leader, to call this relationship as G2, the group of 2, what does it mean? What are the down-the-line implications for India, for China's behavior in this region, its rise? Essentially now Trump is saying that China is a peer, an equal.
Yes, his reference to a G2 moment, some kind of G2 structure in dealing with global problems, it does represent Trump acknowledging China as a peer nation. That's a fact. But I will not go to the extreme of concluding that we have arrived at some kind of duopoly or bipolar world. where global governance will be managed by two countries, the USA and China, is far from that. In context of meeting in Busan, it was more in nature of rhetorical flourish on part of Trump. Everything he says shouldn't be taken literally, in fact. We need to see what are the actions being taken by USA, what are the implications of those actions. As things stand, I think what happened during a 90-minute meeting between President Trump and President Xi Jinping amounted to, as is widely acknowledged, more, a kind of trade truce and de-escalation rather than any reset in US-China relations.
Okay.
Fundamental contradictions and differences between USA and China have not gone away. They remain relevant in different fields. So possibility of their working together in a duopoly, frankly, is remote. Even if you don't include other factors like there is dispersal of power today. There's agency on part of other countries, including countries like India and Japan, which makes it very difficult for USA and China, even if they are so inclined to move towards some kind of carving out of spheres influence. So I don't think we are on the verge of G2 moment.
I do want to ask you about, if Trump were to continue on this theme of G2 or however he wants to frame it, what are the down the line implications for a country like India? For example, the India-US partnership over the last 20, 25 years maybe was premised on a fact that in this part of the world, America was willing to take a bet on India as some kind of a counterweight or some kind of a, alternative to China, or to say at least that, okay, here is another big country, billion plus people, who could possibly be a counterweight to China. Do you think that strategic logic has been appended, not least because of what we've seen in the India-US relationship itself over the last 6 months, but also because of what's been happening with China?
Jaka, you're absolutely right. The strategic underpinnings of India-US partnership have been undermined. There's no doubt about it, because one, clue bringing two nations together in strategic terms was shared concerns about China, a desire to see that China is suitably balanced, not necessarily contained, but balanced. Now, whether Mr. Trump is inclined to pursue that line of thinking and action, one is not clear about it. Secondly, the way he assesses India's value in US-China contestation, again, is questionable. Perhaps it's getting much lesser salience than what was the case earlier. Other point we must note, and I have argued that in a recent opinion piece, that what happened in recent months, especially what happened in Busan also, shows how balance of power has shifted to China's advantage. Right. And USA is willing to accommodate that to a considerable extent. So India's relevance as a strategic factor in Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific has been dented. There's no doubt about it. Apart from the fact that today India-US strategic partnership, which was by and large on an upward trajectory for the last 25 years, is passing through a period of considerable stress and strain. So if you combine these factors and are continuing, problems with China, I think we are in a position of disadvantage today.
All right, Ambassador Kant, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Ambassador Ashok Kant, former Indian ambassador to China, with his thoughts and perspective into the big meeting that happened in Busan, also what the down-the-line implications are for India and other countries in the region. So amid the tariffs and the tantrums and the hyperbole from Donald Trump against India, Finnish President Alexander Stubb tells First Post that India should not be singled out for buying Russian oil. In fact, he calls for collective responsibility and praises India as a rising superpower. Here's an excerpt of that exclusive interview with First Post managing editor Palki Sharma.
There's a lot of pressure on India to stop buying Russian oil. and the US president has in fact imposed 25% punitive tariffs on India for doing that, when the fact is that China is the biggest buyer of Russian oil and Europe has been buying Russian energy. Would you say that it's unfair to single India out?
I won't take issue with that, because this is a decision that India does all by itself. It's a big player, it's an independent actor, and it decides what's best for its foreign policy. What I will say is that the things that used to bring us together are now used to tear us apart. So interdependence, trade or energy was supposed to be things that brought us together, but now they can actually be weaponized. I think what President Trump has indicated is that Europe must stop buying oil and gas from Russia, and there are two countries which I mentioned earlier, Hungary and Slovakia, that still do it. Having said that, we have reduced our dependency on Russian energy by 80%, which I think is quite good. China is buying Russian energy, and there have been some secondary sanctions put on some of the key players. And then, of course, the threats coming from the United States on China and India have led to the fact, for instance, by sanctioning Lukoil and Rosneft, that both India and China are taking distance on this. But these are difficult foreign policy decisions. All I can say is that without oil and gas exports, Russia would not be able to afford to conduct this war. But I'm not going to blame India, I'm going to blame all of us collectively.
So you agree that it's unfair to target India?
I think India is not the only one to blame here.
So you agree that India or any other country is free to buy oil or energy from any other country, including Russia, as long as there are no United Nations sanctions?
Again, I'm not going to give advice to India on this. What I can say is that I hope that the European Union and India can finalize its free trade agreement sooner rather than later. India is a big player in all of this, and what India does matters. About the United Nations, I can say, and I've said this in the General Assembly twice now, I want the UN Security Council to be expanded. Its membership should be at least doubled. I think it is utterly, it is wrong that countries like India are not in the UN Security Council. I have suggested that we should have at least one member from Latin America, 2 from Africa, and 2 from Asia. Why? Because I believe in multilateralism, and because I think that if players like India don't feel that they have agency or skin in the game in the United Nations, the institution is going to continue to weaken.
I killed my...
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
The Indian Heaven Premier League T20 cricket tournament taking place in Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir, involving local, national and international players, has encountered significant challenges. Some players are stranded at a local hotel, and reports suggest that organizers have fled the valley. The event, organized by a private company and sponsors, is facing difficulties after several players allegedly boycotted the matches due to unpaid dues, leading to a disruption.
Instructed this morning to lock all doors and leave all players and all staff within the building on instruction from the league. Unfortunately, they have had to carry that out. We are still waiting for the balance to be paid. It's made the rest of the payment. We have come to an agreement with the owners at this moment in time to allow the players home to their families, as obviously they're not getting any money whilst they're here. They haven't been paid themselves, and it's not fair on the players being away from their homes and their families for this long.
That's quite a charge that's coming from one of the English umpires there, going on record talking about unpaid dues. She's also, in fact, claiming that all of the players have been put on these hotel arrests in Srinagar. The sponsors, the organizers have fled, and they have not paid the dues, and that's why the players have refused to be participating in that entire Indian Heaven Premier League tournament. And remember, this is not just about local players. There are international players who have come, national level players who are associated with this particular tournament, but certainly ended up giving a bad name to this entire Premier League that was announced initially, and now is facing too many hurdles, and allegations have been really bad as far as this entire tournament is concerned. If players are coming on record, they're talking about how they have been placed under arrest. They're not even being allowed to go out of Srinagar to go back to their families. My colleague Ishan Vani is now joining us on the broadcast. Ishan, that's a huge claim that has been made by the players. They've gone on record. They're talking about how they are on hotel arrest. Dues have not been paid, not just of the hotels, but also to the players.
Well, absolutely right. The problem stemmed when the league did not see so much of participation of local coming to watch. If you recall, there was a league last year which had a massive crowd. Even tickets and the stadium were sold out, and there was